Happy Thursday to you, Nan.
Happy Thursday.
Did you see they were pinging you over in that model spec PR?
I did. I guess that's my bad for reacting to comments there.
I feel like they keep talking around the question that I'm asking them.
Yeah.
I'm just questioning these four characters. The whole rest of the whole discussion here is completely outside of what I'm asking.
Yeah. And that's also part of why I don't want to engage because I don't want to be in that same situation, and also I want to discuss that other half. Because I don't get it. Like, we're talking about 1024 bytes. That's it. At most. For a single tar header. Easy to strip, easy to just like hard code a range request to ignore when you're reading the blob back to the client.
It depends on the client. I get where you're coming from. I get that there are use cases where people might not want to do that. And I suspect that they're going to interpret your question to say, why not compress it?
Yeah, I don't think they should compress it, but I also don't think that they actually have a use case for files of that size.
Well, I don't know how big some of these AI models are getting these days.
Sure, but why are they single files? Like, we've spent 50 years learning lessons about file storage and database storage on disk, and we don't store things as single enormous files just because hard drives used to be small. Like, it is generally more efficient to break up your data, and it gives you more flexibility in how you consume and use your data.
Which the response came back that if they chunk their layers in advance, this was, I think, issue 573 I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
That,
so why store them as one big blob on the registry then?
yeah, came back and said, hey, that works too.
Because if they would split these up into smaller chunks on the file system, everything would get smoother and better.
We are talking about people writing LM models where they're not thinking about performance, they're thinking about the singularity.
Yeah.
Hey, Joy,
Well, hello there, Brandon. How are you?
doing well. Did you see my email?
I saw it. I've been stuck in meetings all morning, and I was like, "Oh, I'll get to that on the OCI call." So,
No, no rush,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I was curious where that might be going to.
that is a great question. Let's go. Let's go. Let me go. Let me go bring that up here. I love
Probably
it.
going to someone like Josh, who is like, go see hi. I'll get to that one of these months.
Yeah, it sounds to me like Jory has clued in to the actual purpose of this meeting, which is to put an OCI slot on our calendars so that if there's any pending OCI work, now we have an hour to work on it while we're pretending to listen to what's being discussed.
That
Y'all are pretending to
happens.
listen?
You know what? Honestly, a lot of times I do like to leave my camera on so that people can like, I don't tell if you can always tell if somebody's like doing email or something. But I am in this case, I am legit right now trying to hunt down where that alias is going. Let's see, that's gonna be
Well, while you're hunting that down, um, we can go ahead and kick this thing off. And the first one was, where is that email alias going? But whenever you get around to it, um, as you're looking that up, though, that was included in this form that I was looking at saying, does anybody use or care at all about this form? Let me do a window share. So in the conformance page, there is this nice little OCI certified form where you're supposed to say, hey, let me email this certification email address and put in my contact address, my telephone, check one of these things, do the conformance details, what version, yada, yada. And I'm like,
Today I learned.
yeah, I was looking at going, what on earth?
Alternatively, thanks, I hate it.
Yeah, going
Get
through my head
RM.
is, let's just delete this. Problem solved.
Let's see if we have anybody. Let me see what I can learn about this because I mean, I don't know. Let's see, what are we even, I've never even. Okay, so I need to check out the program terms here. So,
I could understand this more if our conformance had more teeth, but it doesn't.
yeah,
I,
so there are simpler ways to do this, I think, if you want this.
I'm loving the to-dos inside this thing.
To do link.
Or email in the PDF to do. Send that link too. So
Uh,
this does not feel like it was completed.
yeah, the chances are this was not ever actually operationalized. But
Look at the full history of this thing. Steve Winslow did the first one. That goes back before I touched any of this stuff.
well, I can signal Steve.
Well, actually, he was just renaming some fields in here, it looks like. So that might have been even something else. No idea where this came from.
February 2020.
Hang on, renamed. Initial submission. This
Well,
might be
that
Josh
explains
then.
it.
Who was that? What's that? I can't even see the
This is
use.
Josh.
Josh, okay.
Because the Kubernetes conformance does have more teeth than ours. And so it would make sense to have a more formal process like this. And I think at the time Josh did this, it was aspirational that it would have some teeth.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if that email goes to either something internal at OCI or maybe just Josh.
Well, let me I gotta get into your Google Workspace now. Fun times. Okay.
Yeah. There's a blast from way in the past.
Well, so I think okay. Also, do you want to keep doing this? Do you not want to keep doing this? Um, do you want the
My
yeah.
my inclination is delete this. The rest of the conformance repo, we've got a procedure and everything, and the instructions over here kind of walk you through how to run the tests and how to upload them. Yeah, we got directions for doing a pull request on. I'd want to look through here and see, do we have anything linking over to that file in there? And then, yeah, certification of open containers, that email address is linked over here. Review, please contact. So we've got a bunch of references to that email address. So we'll want to find out where that's going.
Yeah. Which totally makes sense. Jump through several hoops of authentication here.
Four-factor authentication.
so secure. I'm locked out of my own account. Very secure. Anyway,
Yeah, no rush.
I think we want to for sure find out where that's going and kind of separately and make sure that folks it's getting surfaced to people who need it, and then separately you know what to do about the program itself. And it sounds like we because there is no, as you say, teeth to it. It's a somewhat of you know a kind of a um decoration, right? Do we want to do anything about that?
I think this was a very aspirational direction that we did go in.
Okay,
And so right now it is probably misleading people.
sure. Okay, well, let me just check with Steve Winslow, who's an attorney, and just see what he may recall about having the about why this may have been set up and what problem we thought we might be solving with it in the first place, and make sure there's no history that we need to bear in mind. But that is fine with me.
Sam, you've got a lot of history of the project, and you just walked in the door, so why not just pick on you right now? Our OCI conformance page has a link to this form on the page. Do you have any recollection of where that came from?
I
Sorry
think
to
it
hit you
came
as soon as you walk
from
in.
I think it came from Chris Anichek, but I don't know the context of the question that you're asking because I just walked in.
Yeah, that's how we like to do it around here. We're like, hey, you just walked in the door. Let's ping him right now. Someone tried to submit this form, and no one's looking at the email right now. It doesn't seem like, and the form itself, I'm looking at saying, do we do anything with this at all? This is OCI conformance is usually a distribution spec conformance appeal, follow through the procedure, send us a PR, and we just approve it. So having this
Yeah,
over there, we're like, do we even need this anymore? I think Josh was the one that originally submitted a PR. It's been touched once or twice. Um, yeah,
I don't know if we need this. I think it might be an LF question as to whether LF requires something like this in order to use the trademarks. So, Jory, I think I'm turning the question back on you.
yeah.
Yeah, so and I think that's part of why I want to maybe go understand from Steve, and I suppose now also Chris, like if that's part of the um trademark usage requirement, is that they are they've filled out this form for the conformance program participation. Yeah, then we need to probably keep it. So um these are good questions.
And just because you weren't here when I was looking through it earlier, Sam, this was Josh submitting it, Chris kind of going through, doing a little bit of review on it, and then they merged it.
Yeah, I think at the time, Josh was likely working on a contract for LF.
Gotcha.
So this seems to me like it's an LF originated
Yeah.
document. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, certification goes to Chris Anichek.
All right. Tell him to check
And
his email.
yeah, I'm just gonna ask to join the group. Reason for joining. Let me in, Chris. Jory.
That's a good reason.
That's literally what I'm writing. So let's see. So it goes to to Chris and to an account that is not monitored, which is LF LF admin for that's IT. So that mystery solved. That's where that's going. Theoretically, if it has received any emails, Chris got them. And as soon as he permits the program manager account to join, that I will have I'll have info on anybody that's filled it out recently.
Okay. Yeah, the PR said that they submitted a few times and didn't get a response. So
Okay.
there'll be something over there.
Yeah. Okay.
Who just kind of curious, there might be something else that completely got missed that
Yeah.
they want to look at. All right. Other minor administrative things, just kind of quick announcements. I don't know how to say this right. There's probably a pronunciation guide somewhere out there. Umochi, UMOCI. They had a release, so just kind of wanted to say, hey, heads up, new release. I think Rom's probably the one person that really likes that one. And then also in the random little announcement thing, I got this to the point that I feel like it's worth taking a look at. And this is going to be something that probably want to send over to some of the Go Digest maintainers over there and just say, hey, FYI, just kind of played around with this for a little bit and have an alternative implementation. A few of the reasons why is mainly because one, because I put all the data types into a private field of a struct, it means that I control setting it rather than something else just changing the values of a string. So as I read the values in or parse the value, I do all the pre-processing on the front to all the validation up front, all the error responses and whatnot. And so I don't have panics in any of the code in there anymore. It's got alternate encodings if someone needed to do something other than a base 64 encoding of the or the hex encoding or whatever. And yeah, I've also got a pass-through reader and writer, so you don't have to use a T-reader or a multi-writer or something like that to use your code. So a couple of things I was playing with. Figured I'll throw it out there if anybody was interested in having a look, playing around with it. I went ahead and threw it in one of my libraries, but just kind of something to think about. It would be, if we changed Go Digest to do something like this, it would be a hard version, a major version, because all the APIs changed to put errors on the returns. Alrighty. And feel free to stop me if I'm going along. After the OCI Digest, yeah, that was, I figured I'm just doing OCI stuff over here. Not trying to beamichify everything. It's just OCI. This one kind of got my attention because they're saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and make a spec that's defining an artifact, and we want to do it in a vendor neutral place. And it's kind of going as an alternative. I don't know if it's proper to say competing with. I think they had a couple of, yeah, I mean, they list a few similar projects, but for how to package LLM model inside, I don't know, it might be also AI models in general, inside of an OCI artifact and ship it. And they're like, we don't think OCI is the right place for this. So they went over to CNCF, and I just kind of wanted to just put some visibility into it, let people know this exists over there. And if you have opinions, feel free to throw them out. It's open for a vote right now. I don't think they finished the vote, but they're getting up there. Yeah, they're waiting for 2 more votes. Sam, jump in.
Do we know why they said they don't think OCI is a good fit?
So Chris specifically said that OCI is a trailing spec, and he thinks that this is a little bit not well enough baked. There's a little bit too much active development happening over there right now, that he feels like maybe in the future this can go to OCI, but for right now it makes more sense to do the active development in CNCF.
Okay. I mean, I don't really have an issue with that. It's
Yeah.
mostly a question of where do they want to, propose to host it, rather than like us as an organization saying, no, we want you here. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. If at some point they say they want to be more in a standards focused body than like a project focused body, then we can look at that. But I don't think it makes a big deal.
The only thing that kind of caught my attention is that they didn't really even ping us so much. I guess maybe some of their earlier incantations, they came to us and we probably said just define what you need to define. But yeah, as I'm looking through some of the things they're doing, I think Tina and I are back and forth on different sides of why are you even doing some of this stuff. And they've been going off doing it over on the CNCF side outside of our view. And so it means that we're not really giving them the feedback they might want. Saeed, jump on in.
Could this have been added as an OCI extension, perhaps?
I don't think extension, because that would have been part of the distribution spec. I could have seen them going as a working group,
Okay.
because we do have the concept of working groups if you need to develop a new spec and you're still going through the motions and trying to figure things out, and that could have been perfectly valid to me. I don't have an issue if they want to be on CNCF, but I just want to make sure that people that had an OCI interest were aware, just because when it happens over there, sometimes it's out of our view. And if you look at some of their current work, let's see here. They had the model spec discussion. This one was just on the media types themselves, which is probably getting a little bit into the weeds. But this discussion is in the model spec repo itself. And this repo, they define their spec and what they feel like they should have in the spec, what their media types are that they've defined. They've got a configure here, it looks like, which I'm guessing some of this is kind of going off of what we've got right now, you know, a little bit of a leverage of the OCI image config, but their own take on it. They got a few annotations over here. So they're working on some things. As I was looking at this, I saw this issue and they were talking about, do we really need to have this? And immediately I looked at it and said, why do we have .raw? Why don't we just say that it's the vendor CNAI model doc v1? That discussion has kind of gone a little bit circular. And then Tianon looks at this and says, why do we not just make everything a tar? So there are competing and alternative ideas for how they might want to ship this stuff. And this discussion kind of goes for a little bit. They keep circling back to it. We need to ship this because we're mounting as a volume and we don't want to do compression because compression adds a lot of overhead. And I think we're all in agreement with that goal, but we see different paths to getting there. Anything more folks want to chat about on that one? I know I'm just kind of racing through these, but I feel like we get a lot of our discussion toward the end, and I definitely want to, most of these were just more FYIs. All right, this one is an honest question that I don't know the answer to. So I thought I would throw it out there and see if anybody knows so that I don't have to dig through a whole bunch of code. Cryo. Saeed, weren't you on the Red Hat side of this? Not sure if you know this at all.
Yes.
We've got, they added to Cryo the ability to mount an arbitrary artifact, and maybe it's only an artifact that has a tar and a config that's got a JSON, and they just don't care as much about all the other media types. I'm guessing that's an artifact type because that couldn't be a manifest art media type. Maybe they're doing some kind of duck typing on the manifest they're loading in and allowing that to be used, but I'm curious if they're allowing people to mount individual artifact files, how
I
they're
don't
handling
think so.
permissions, owners, all that stuff.
I don't think they're so this one's an older PR. They're when they say OCI artifacts, they refer to an artifact wrapped in a tar or GZ.
Okay,
So
so
yeah, it's just um
so it does have to be a tar still. I
yeah.
was curious if they were doing some kind of file name automatic mapping in there and setting up user owner permissions, all that stuff.
No, unfortunately not. I would love that to happen, but yeah, I think like permissions and that's the biggest challenge right now.
What the file name is, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not going as far as I thought they were going. I could have sworn that they were getting farther along in there. Actually, I'm going to challenge you on that. Because I think somewhere in here, let me find the PR that went to this. I don't know, CI artifacts. Thanks for opening. There is a linked. Now this is merged. So looking at this thing, it got merged. The whole reason that I didn't want to dig into this is this number over here. We've got 12,000 additional lines and another 3,000 change lines there, something like that. I didn't want to look through all of that. I think a lot of it is vendor. So if I take out all the, well, yeah, if I take out all the vendor stuff, that shrinks us down a lot. Now, if I go in and look at some of their test artifacts, they've got an ORS push for like an artifact.txt and artifact.sh as part of their testing procedure here. So unless ORS is converting that into a tar gzip for a single file, which I don't think it does,
No.
I think they are testing against an individual file mount.
Wait, when was this merged?
PR 9062. Go up and find for you. One sec. March
March
20, looks
20.
like.
Yeah. Okay, so this one's a more recent one. I can ask them.
Yeah.
I tested the cryo volume mounts in January. So maybe you're right. I can ask them. Give me a few minutes.
Yeah. No rush. I figured if we had people here that were familiar with it, it would be interesting to find out what that process is. I think folks on the Containerd side are probably scratching their heads as to how they want to handle it. The upstream KEP doesn't really have details on that right now, so there's a lot of
Actually, if this is working, I can ask someone from the cryo team to join next week's call to explain us how this works.
okay. That was my honest question. I didn't know. I was kind of curious and figured, hey, I can just throw this question in the meeting and someone might show up and answer it. Might not, but might. I think Sam, I think you were the one saying on the Containerd side of this that the KEP itself doesn't really document how to handle permissions and other things if you're mounting an arbitrary artifact, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I agree. That's kind of an ongoing question that we probably want to lock down a little bit, standardize. Cool. Well, given all that, we're up to the last item on the list, which was just kind of looking at the large upload of large artifacts, which the only comment I saw in here was that, hey, if we chunk this up into a bunch of layers and push all that work over to the client side, we see a nice little performance improvement too. So
Yeah.
that would be another alternative. And I think that kind of goes to Tianan's initial comment. We were kicking this meeting off of, hey, why do we have these giant files for everything? Why don't we make small files?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's up to the client who's pushing.
Yeah.
One thing I'm thinking of was relaxing the requirement for serial chunked upload. Is that, I mean, that itself gives the clients to upload a single blob via chunked upload in parallel. Like it's another PR, I believe, or it's another issue somewhere.
That's
Um,
what I'm scrolling down to find. Concurrent
even
upload
if we
stored for
can
weeks.
give them that, I think that's a huge step in my opinion. And then the registry owners can figure out how to deal with saving state for those parallel uploads. It's not impossible to do it, but again, it's something that clients can use to um, optimize or increase their throughput.
If you go that direction of saying we want to have a registry that supports that, this is issue 546, where we were looking at that. And this is my take on that, which is you're going to have old clients, new clients,
Yes.
old registries, new registries. However you implement it, you need to make sure that you don't break any combination of the two.
Yeah, I think that's doable through like headers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Making when someone's doing a chunked upload, you can respond like the first request to upload, which gives the upload link. You can say in that you accept parallel uploads.
And I saw that Rom had to drop a little bit ago. Maybe he'll come back later on. But I think one of the key things was that if you do that upload with multiple chunks out of order concurrently, however that's going to happen, you still have to compute the digest for the registry to
Yes.
do the validation. And that is a
That's-
serial process.
That is true. Um, that is true. But it's still a good step in the right direction, I feel. We've reduced one thing. So in my testing, I was doing it from a VM in AWS to ECR. And with a single upload, I could not max out my network card or the NIC on the VM. So definitely we're bottlenecked with the NIC speed on a TCP connection.
Tion's not coming off mute, so I'm just going to say his comment out loud, which is he's going on the record. Such huge files are bad. We collectively should feel bad.
Uh, I mean, yeah, I guess so. But
He's just trolling. He's half serious, but he's just trolling.
I'm
I
100% serious, Brandon. There's
I mean,
there's
I don't.
actually no trolling in this one. I'm 100% serious.
No, that's fine. Like, but we don't control, like as a registry operators, we don't control what files people generate, and it seems like people like to generate big files, especially nowadays. And with OCI artifacts, we're inviting people to upload those things. Yes,
Well,
you can
Sam
control
is
the
throwing
rules.
down the gauntlet. Registry's going to always enforce a maximum layer size.
Yeah, we do actually. But our limit is kind of high. Um, yeah, I don't know. We have a use case where people are generating these big files.
I'm mentally channeling an old Seinfeld episode of No Blob for You.
I'm not ECR, but I have been able to upload
Oh,
big files on ECR though.
sorry, I just thought because you mentioned you were testing ECR.
Yes, I am testing ECR. So I operate Koi.io. I don't want to be biased to my own product, so I'm not using it in my testing.
Got it. Makes sense.
All right. That was everything I threw on the agenda. Feel free to discuss amongst yourselves if anything else you want to throw on there or continue discussion on this. I'm not cutting you off.
So ignoring the discussion about whether big files are good or bad, the reality is that there are big files in the world and people use them. And the more AI stuff we talk about, the bigger those files are getting. So we have to deal with reality here and figure out a way to efficiently give people the option of like efficiently uploading those files.
Counterpoint. What if we delay long enough for the AI hype bubble to pop?
Yeah, that is an option.
I think another way to phrase my objection here is that uploading to a registry is not the only friction point they will experience with large files. And the larger their files become, the more and more dramatic those friction points will become. And so it is in their best interest to stop creating such huge files and instead create many small files.
Which I think goes back, that's calling out the chunked option that you're mentioning. The nice thing about some kind of chunked option here is that your CDNs are going to work with it nicely. Both uploads and downloads are going to see the benefit because, you know, if you get an interrupted connection, if you've pre-chunked and someone's pulling down a massive layer, they're only losing that one chunk of a layer, not the whole thing. So
Yeah, that's true.
there's pros to that.
The con I see with a single, like with chunking a single file, is that you no longer have a single, like a blob endpoint for that file, right? You cannot associate a single digest with a single file, so that would kind of break that.
The path, I think I mentioned it early, was you can throw that into some kind of annotation, use that for your deduplication and reconstruction. And that would be whatever your LLM, you know, implementation is, or whatever other tool it is, to keep track of that themselves. Something to think about.
Yeah.
All right, I raced through everything. There weren't a lot of people stopping me. Who else wants to chat about fun OCI stuff? Does anybody want to get rid of panics and go digest? I'm throwing out softballs here. Somebody should be excited about that.
Yes, please. Kill the panic.
Panic at the Disco. Mike, long time no see.
Hey, yep. Other things going on this time, unfortunately.
We were kind of wrapping up a little bit, but feel free to interrupt, and anything in here that caught your attention that you'd like to chat about, feel free to have us circle back. Let's see, the interesting thing that you might want to chat about was Cryo has their way of mounting an arbitrary artifact, and I was asking them how they handle ownership permissions, even the file name itself of what they're mounting, thinking of how that aligns with what Containerd is thinking of doing on that one.
Yeah, no gross detail on that yet. They're loading artifacts that we don't load because they didn't have the right chaining. There's issues. We're even checking certain tag names, tag types, and they weren't. It's not clear to me that we should loosen up our restrictions. But I do agree with Tina, we probably shouldn't throw panics.
So the
I
panic
mean,
one comes from something I've been playing with a little bit,
yeah.
which is an alternative digest implementation.
Ah,
And the Go Digest alternative that I came up with throws the data types inside of private fields in a struct instead of just type def of a string or something like that.
okay.
And so I control when you set the values in there, I can return an error instead of a panic. I added alternative encodings. I did nice little pass-through reader and writer implementations in there, so you don't have to do a T reader and a T write or a multi-writer kind of implementation.
Gotcha.
But in doing so, all the APIs change completely. The new digest now returns an error. The new digest from encoded returns an error. So all these things return errors, which you'd have to do a V2 on the Go Digest implementation if you want to go this direction.
Right. And that's fine. Or just another API. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why I threw this one out there and just kind of wrote it. I'm trying it out in some of my own code right now to see how it works. I figured this was a big enough change that someone should play with it for a while and think about it before proposing as a V2 to Go Digest, just because of how many people are using Go Digest.
Okay. So you were thinking a migration path or instead of a new API?
I'm thinking like eventually turn it into Go Digest V2, but I want to kind of throw it out there and have people chew on it for a little bit and think about it rather than me saying, hey, let's start submitting a whole bunch of PRs to Go Digest, because that would be too much for anybody to even consider right now. The other thing to note, in the register, I just take the name of the algorithm and encoder, which that's something you don't have, and the new function that will output the hash dot hash. I don't have another algorithm type in there you're passing in this. And so this allows someone to just say, hey, let me go ahead and register. Where do I have them? Up here? My SHA-256 with a hex encoding and the SHA-256.new function. And so you don't have to make a new data type to pass in and do this. You just, other than the encoder hex, which I already made, so people don't have to re-implement that.
Okay. And there was no easy way to modify the return codes or anything like that. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, as soon as you start throwing errors on return codes on returns, at that point you're changing all the APIs.
Yeah, especially if we don't have something we can stuff them in a context or some other that doesn't look like they're being passed in.
Yeah, no.
You don't no obvious tricks that could be had here. Okay.
I mean, right now the obvious trick is panic everywhere, and I think that's what people are trying to get away from.
Yeah. Okay.
So did that. There is a little encoding thing over here that just validates that it's hex. You encode into hex, you validate that it is hex. Super simple API on that interface. So in the future, if we decide we want to have something that's not hex, that we want to return base 64 or some other encoding of digest, this has that flexibility to do that.
Okay.
I was looking through the code, saw a bunch of to-dos, and I was like, this is easy enough to write, so I threw that in there as well. So something for folks to think about. But like I say, big enough change I wanted to put out there to have people chew on, rather than me pushing it out there as like, hey, PR, Go Digest implementers, maintainers, let's go ahead and switch to this. And if you look at it and you're like, hey, we like half of it, we'll take a few things in there, that's cool too.
So, Brandon, are you planning to merge this into our Go Digest, or do you want to keep a separate OCI Digest?
For the short term, I'll keep it separate. For the long term, I think this depends on the Go Digest maintainers. But I would imagine that the Go Digest maintainers are probably going to want to hear from other people, look at this and say, yeah, this wasn't too bad to switch to. I would be willing to take a V2 kind of bump to migrate to something like this.
I'm not looking at that list. Is it still Steve-O pretty much, or?
I think Steve-O does a lot. I think Derek was over there as well. Derek, Steve-O, VBATS is still there, Akihiro, and Sebastian. Not sure how much VBATS is still doing on that one, but the other ones I'm sure fairly active, but also considering what this code is doing, fairly conservative on what they accept.
Yeah. Yeah. Last time I talked to Steve-O, he was expressing some interest. So, and getting back into the game, if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you might be able to get some help from him on it.
Yep. I think Derek was here a while back and we were chatting about this for a while. So I think
Yeah.
he's got some interest in seeing what people are thinking about with that. I think everybody over there is going to hesitate to say, yeah, let's go this direction for good reason. What works is there and it's, good enough for now until something is past the point of too much pain.
Well, that's why I was asking, did you not just want to have an enhanced digest API set there versus a V2? Because that sort of intimates that there's a migration path, right?
Yeah, when I compared the two, let me pull these
Yeah.
up. Where do I have that back there? Where is that tab? I already lost my tab, didn't I? Yeah, so if I compare the two implementations, they're going to have some differences in like a lot of the functions in here now have error returns, but I kept a lot of them similar. So it's not completely breaking, but it is breaking in that there are error types on a lot of these things. I think I took one or two of them out.
I mean, you could always wrap it, and then I guess from a wrapper perspective, you could still have the old APIs, but again, that would.
I mean, if you wrap it, you're gonna have like a new function in there. It's gonna be from bytes error to have the error type in there, and then if you just call from bytes, you're gonna have to do the same panic that you have out there today.
Well, yeah, you could use default logger on the errors instead of throwing a panic, or have a config if you wanted for the throw the panic.
I think you gotta throw a panic. The
Yeah,
cases that you're
probably.
gonna throw the panic are small enough that I think a lot of people won't even bother checking the errors. I mean, a lot of people are just going to accept the risk that it could panic and just not even worry about it because this is out there today. It's been out there for however long. There are very few times when this actually could panic, but it is possible.
Yeah.
And I really wonder how many people are validating when they parse when they load one of those strings in there, how many people are actually validating the algorithm that they're loading in and making sure it's correct. If they read this in from a JSON marshaller, if they're validating the digest before they try to use it, because someone could potentially generate a malicious manifest that would panic runtime out there if they're not checking it. You could generate a manifest that has a fake invalid SHA-257 algorithm. And SHA-257 is not a valid algorithm. Panic because you got an invalid one. And you have to make sure that you validate that that you're either parsing it or as you read it in there, somewhere in here there is a validate. So you have to run the validate before you ever use it. And I'm guessing a lot of people don't run that and check the error on every single digest they use. You're supposed to.
Yeah, And that's the type of strictness that I'm not catching in all of the code and on the cryo side, as they're loosening things up to be able to support artifacts. That's why, yeah. Just saying, yeah.
I'm being polite, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, hate to be the mean person, but you know, we
You're-
need to validate things.
You're never the mean person. What happened, Mike?
I'm just saying when it comes to loosening up for support of artifact types, I don't want to be the mean person, but right now we are meaner on that.
Yeah.
We're going to need more work in that area.
I will say, as I changed this to have these be structs with internal fields, I had to start adding equal and is zero functions to this stuff for my use cases, because I'm comparing digester. I'm checking to see whether or not it was set correctly or whatnot. So
Okay, cool.
a couple of extra things I had to put in there that other people would just say, is the string equal to an empty string? I can't do that comparison anymore. I now need to have an extra function. So it's not all just errors. There are a few other things from the change.
Did you see?
Performance-wise?
Yeah,
ahead, Mike.
I mean, as you're bringing this up, as you're doing your additional validators without panics and error messages on the digest, did you notice our friend on Yumoki was having similar discussions about validating, other image specs, or image types.
I saw
He was even talking
comment.
about adding additional test buckets and things. That might help us on the distribution side, on the validation stuff in the tooling we were talking about.
I saw one of the fixes in here was like, I'm doing a copy issue, and somewhere in the copy in here, there was an error that I wasn't properly handling. And so it could cause the thing to bubble up an error and fail without doing a nice retry. And it sounded like he was trying to fix a bug that might not have been the actual fix for the bug.
Oh, okay.
Rom, you might know about this better, because I think it might have been a stacker issue.
Is this the exatter stuff? The user exaters? Yeah.
This was the tar file probably had a premature end because you didn't close the tar or the compress handler in the right order.
Yeah, my memory fails me.
So I guess this sort of goes to my point or question. Are we to consider that Yumoki becomes a validation tool for images? And if so, sets a behavior that's expected by the runtimes.
The image spec validation. That's how you're saying the image spec conformance test.
Well, you mean the schema test, or are we talking?
I'm asking you if that's where you're going.
That's where I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So especially with respect to if they're if they're going to add support for artifacts, and we can have the same argument about, image types. But at some point we need to have some better agreement about, what's valid or not, right? And some test buckets. And it sounded like Cypher was willing to go into that space if people were interested, or at least in his blog, he was bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in getting some kind of image spec conformance in there.
Right.
The
So I'm asking, it seemed related to what you were saying on digest. Let's make a version that has conformance, right?
Yeah, the path I'm thinking for an OCI conformance on image spec is that we give people options for using tools to output OCI layout, and then we validate the OCI layout. So you can give us an OCI layout. We'll point you to multiple tools that will generate an OCI layout if you've got content on a registry or something like that.
Right.
And then our validation of image spec is just to do whatever validation on those.
When you say our, do you mean additional tooling that's being built beyond the schema stuff, or is it?
I would point to various tools out there. Maybe Umoki can do it.
That's why
Edge
I'm
Client.
at which one has the preferred validation?
So none of those would do the validation. Each of those would just say, you're giving me content on registry, I'll convert it over into an OCI layout. Once it's in a layout, then we would write the conformance test that would expand the layout, parse through it, and make sure all the content in the layout matches the schema that we expect it to match.
Yeah.
And that would be the conformance test we would have to write.
Right.
That makes sense.
I've been starting, it does make sense. And I've been starting to run into these types of issues as people are starting to use various artifactories, artifact registries, right? In that there, Cryo works one way, Containerd works another. There's ORAS tools that may potentially work in a third way, right? There's your tool, and then we got Umoki, and
I suspect in all those cases, every one of those tools is properly implementing image spec. There is too much variation under
Yep.
that
Yep.
in terms of how people can package together an artifact that each packaging of the artifact is a little different depending on which tool you use.
Right.
Saeed, what you got?
Is there anything that you guys want to ask to the cryo team? I can relay that.
I think my question was mostly just how are they doing the volume mount of an arbitrary artifact that is in a tar, but maybe Mike has other questions.
My question is already being handled in conversations I'm having with Sasha. So we're good, Syed. It was more of a, at this level, at this context, is there, any view that we should start to do a lot more validation checking in areas where there's been a difference of opinion? And by difference of opinion, I mean different in execution. Sometimes cryo is more restrictive, sometimes Containerd is more restrictive, and they're both probably okay as far as the spec goes in their implementation. It's just we didn't have a lot of clarity, I think, and we're missing some validation APIs to be able to throw an image against it and say whether who's right or wrong in the supporting.
Gotcha. So this is more on the image spec, not the distribution spec, I guess.
Sometimes it applies, right? In a distribution call, certain things need to be validated against the image spec, and you're doing a pull before you unpack. You need to validate the manifest. The manifest has a type that's not OCI, or it is OCI, but it's an artifact.
Right.
It's not it's not actually an OCI image. We're running into that kind of situation now. Specifically around the OCI volume support, where initially it said we would support both OCI images and artifacts, but then we backed off on that in the KEP in Kubernetes to state that we would only support OCI images. But then you see we don't have tight checking in cryo, so some artifacts can't actually be loaded and mounted, but they're not images, and maybe it's just a text file. It's not a tar, okay? And but still we're going to mount it, right? So decisions are going to be made, and that may or may not be a good thing, depending on what the spec wants to say down the road with these new artifact types.
I do want to be sensitive on time. We're past the top of the hour here.
Cool.
Any last calls before we wrap this one up?
If you want to help finalize the schedule for container plumbing days, let me know, because we're going to be wrapping that up like next week.
Did you get access to Session Ice?
I did yesterday, and I'm pleased to report it was not a Jory error, so that was good. And I also want to thank you and Sam and Chris and some others for doing the reviews. Sam, you won the award for spending the most time on your reviews. Thank you. And Chris Anachek was the highest. He rated the highest, so people got the. Generally, Chris gave higher scores, so it was just sort of interesting to see stats on the reviewers' stats. So anyway, fun
I
stuff.
win the Grumpy Old Man prize.
You were solidly, there in the. I think you're balanced. So
I had
all right, that's it.
nice parallel distribution, half good, half bad.
Yes. Maybe that's it. All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.